Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we take the comprehensive source material you've shared with us and distill it down to the pure, concentrated insights you need to be truly well-informed.
Today, our focus is on a state defined by a magnificent duality, industrial might on one hand, and a seemingly endless expanse of freshwater on the other.
We are diving deep into Michigan. It's a state that actively resists easy categorization.
And that's precisely why it's so fascinating to explore. We're moving beyond, the simple mitten jokes to really understand its geopolitical significance.
Our sources highlight its defining titles. You have the Great Lakes State, which is obvious.
Right? Then the traditional Wolverine state, which we'll get into because it's a bit of a mystery. And my personal favorite, the truly poetic Water Winter Wonderland.
Okay, let's unpack this from the geographical ground up. Michigan is a big deal, not just in its cultural footprint, but statistically.
It really is. It sits as the 10th largest state by population with over 10 million residents and the 11th largest by total land area.
But here's the specific detail that makes it unique, and this one really stood out to me from the sourcing.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Michigan is the single largest state by total area located entirely east of the Mississippi River.
Exactly. That is a massive territory we're dealing with. It's huge.
And that sheer scale, combined with its inescapable connection to water, it's just encapsulated so beautifully in the state motto.
It's one of the best out there, honestly. It's derived from Latin. Si queris peninsulam amoenam circumspice.
I love that. For our listeners, what's the translation of that phrase and why is it so significant?
It means, if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you.
Ah, so simple.
It's brilliant because it's a direct, almost boastful nod to its geography. The sources draw a parallel to the epitaph for the famed British architect, Sir Christopher Wren.
In St. Paul's Cathedral, right?
His masterpiece. His epitaph basically says, if you seek my monument, look around you. But unlike Wren's work, which you have to go to London to see, Michigan is saying, our pleasant geography is the artwork, and it's inescapable. You're surrounded by it.
Inescapable is absolutely the right word, especially when you consider the fundamental physical fact that structures the entire state. The peninsular divide.
You've got two distinct landmasses.
The heavily forested Upper Peninsula, the UP, which juts eastward from Wisconsin.
And then the massive, more populated Lower Peninsula, which, looks like a giant mitten.
And these two very different regions are geographically separated by the narrow, often treacherous Straits of Mackinac,
which connect Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And the only thing linking them for ground travel, and this is a critical piece of national infrastructure, is the 5-mile-long Mackinac Bridge.
Sometimes called the Mighty Mac.
A Mighty Mac carrying I-75. That bridge isn't just a road, it's a symbolic artery connecting two vastly different cultures and economies.
The sources really hammer home the point that Michigan is essentially defined by water, almost to a degree no other state can claim.
Oh, without a doubt. It borders 4 of the 5 Great Lakes Erie, Huron, Michigan, and Superior Plus Lake St. Clair.
And the statistic that jumped out at me immediately, Michigan has the single longest freshwater coastline of any U.S. political subdivision.
Yes, and that number is just staggering when you look at it. 3,288 miles.
Wow.
And that includes an additional 1,056 miles of island shoreline. To put that in perspective for you, if you were to stretch Michigan's coastline out, it would be longer than the entire east coast of the United States.
That's incredible. It's a massive maritime environment in the middle of a continent.
And when you look at the total square mileage of the state, the water area is huge. While it ranks second behind Alaska in just, square miles of water.
At first in percentage.
The first in percentage. Approximately 42% of its total area is water.
That's nearly half the state.
Exactly. And that figure only covers the boundary water. The inland statistics are just as compelling.
64,000 inland lakes, the sources say.
An incredible 64,980 inland lakes and ponds. This density of water leads to the astonishing geographical detail that should really stick with you, the listener.
This is the one.
No point in Michigan is more than 6 miles from a natural water source.
6 miles.
Or more than 85 miles from a Great Lakes shoreline. You are perpetually surrounded by water. You're never truly far from a major body of it.
That geographical dominance must fundamentally inform the culture, right?
It does, immediately. Think about the Lower Peninsula, the famous mitten.
Right. Everyone does it.
Residents use their actual hand to point out where they live. If you're visiting Detroit, someone might hold up their hand and point to the base of their thumb.
Or Traverse City, up near the little finger.
Exactly. This simple act is a shared piece of cultural shorthand that instantly identifies you as a Michigander.
And then you have the Upper Peninsula, which is a world unto itself.
Completely. It's sparsely populated with fewer than 330,000 inhabitants. It's rugged, with mountainous western regions like the Porcupine Mountains.
And Mount Arvon, the state's highest point, which is just under 2,000 feet.
That geographical isolation is profound. Consider the long distance involved. Ironwood in the far western UP is a daunting 630 highway miles from Lambertville in the southeastern Lower Peninsula corner.
That's a full day of driving.
Oh, easily. And this isolation has fueled a distinct identity known as the Yooper identity and dialect.
The sources point out that the Yooper dialect is heavily influenced by the waves of Scandinavian and Canadian immigrants who settled there.
Yes, during the 19th century mining and lumber booms.
Can you elaborate on the kind of identity this isolation fosters?
It fosters a rugged independence, a close-knit community focused on the outdoors and industrial work. They feel geographically and, sometimes culturally distant from the metropolitan Lower Peninsula.
So much so that they've tried to become their own state.
In fact, that sense of separation has historically fueled multiple, albeit failed, attempts to establish the UP as its own state superior.
Superior, I like it.
It's a recurring political and cultural theme. The state is, in a way, a physical and psychological state of two minds connected by one mighty bridge.
It's incredible to think about a piece of geography that was obtained through political compromise, later forming a separatist identity. Okay, so let's turn to the history that laid the foundations for this state.
Before the French or the British ever staked a claim, this Great Lakes region was inhabited for thousands of years by Algonquian peoples.
Right, the core of that heritage centered around the Council of Three Fires.
That's the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi.
The Ojibwe or Chippewa were the largest group, right? Estimated at over 35,000 people.
Exactly. And the Odawa, or Ottawa, and the Potawatomi completed that alliance. The sources also mention other tribes present, including the Mascoutin, the Menominee,
the Miami, and the Iroquois-speaking Wyandot, historically known as the Huron.
Yes, and they were sometimes adversaries of the powerful Iroquois Confederation to the east. It was a complex political landscape long before Europeans arrived.
And the state's name is rooted in this indigenous heritage, specifically its deep connection to water.
Yes. The sources debate the exact etymology, but the consensus is that it comes from the Ojibwe word Michigami,
which means large water or large lake.
Precisely. The alternative theory suggests it derived from the Michigan tribe of Mackinac Island. But either way, the centrality of the Great Lakes to the state's identity was established long before Europeans arrived.
So the French were the first Europeans to formally enter and claim the region. The sources mention Etienne Brulé as early as 1622.
And following him were the Catholic missions. Père Jacques Marquette established the first permanent European settlement at Sault Ste. Marie in 1668.
And that was a crucial strategic move.
Oh, absolutely. It secured a foothold at the critical juncture between Lake Superior and Lake Huron. It was the choke point.
And then, in 1701, Antoine de la Motte Cadillac founded Fort Pontchartrain du Détroit. This became the key hub.
That location was everything. It wasn't just a random spot. Cadillac chose the narrowest point of the Detroit River, the strait, to control the vast fur trading and shipping networks of the Great Lakes.
So Detroit means strait in French.
That's it. And the settlement grew rapidly. By 1765, Detroit had 800 people. By 1778, with 2,144 inhabitants, it was the largest European settlement between Montreal and New Orleans.
The central strategic artery of New France in the interior.
You got it. But the French claim eventually dissolved. The sources detail that after the French and Indian War in 1763, Michigan was ceded to Great Britain.
And later became part of the British province of Quebec.
And here's where the transition to American control gets messy and takes decades.
Right. It wasn't a clean handoff.
Not at all. Although the land was theoretically ceded to the U.S. in the 1783 Treaty of Paris, the British maintained physical and military control of Detroit.
Why? What was the issue?
Boundary disputes and just poor cartography in the treaty text. So it wasn't until the 1794 Jay Treaty that the British finally agreed to withdraw. Even then, American control wasn't truly uncontested in the UP until the 1840s.
And that early 19th century was marked by that ongoing tension, culminating in the War of 1812.
A painful period for the territory. Michigan Territory was surrendered early in the war. The state witnessed its bloodiest conflict, the severe American defeat at the Battle of the River Raisin.
Which was then compounded by the subsequent massacre of American prisoners.
A really brutal chapter. The territory was only recaptured by Americans in 1813, following Oliver Hazard Perry's naval victory at the Battle of Lake Erie.
But the real inflection point for massive population growth wasn't a military victory, it was infrastructure.
Correct. The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 was the catalyst. It connected the Great Lakes to the Hudson River and, crucially, to New York City and the Atlantic seaboard.
So suddenly, Michigan, which was once this remote frontier, was easily accessible.
The floodgates opened. This triggered a massive influx of settlers from New England and New York looking for land. They came for farming, lumbering, shipping. By the 1830s, Michigan had enough people, around 30,000 residents, to seek statehood.
And this brings us to one of the most famous political trade-offs in American history, the Toledo War.
Which wasn't really a war.
No, it was non-lethal, but it was a heated boundary dispute with Ohio over the Toledo Strip.
A tiny piece of land containing the mouth of the Maumee River and, crucially, access to Lake Erie shipping routes.
So the resolution's what sets up modern Michigan. Congress awarded the valuable Toledo Strip to Ohio.
And to placate Michigan, they offered a seemingly worthless tract of land, the western part of the Upper Peninsula.
What's so fascinating here is the immediate historical irony.
It's incredible. The UP was seen as a frozen wasteland, a terrible consolation prize.
But just years later, massive deposits of copper and iron ore were discovered, transforming that concession into an unimaginable jackpot.
I mean, you can't make it up. In terms of raw material wealth that fueled the Industrial Revolution, Michigan absolutely won that deal in the long run. The UP became America's iron and copper engine.
So Michigan was admitted as the 26th state, a free state, on January 26, 1837.
And that resource extraction started immediately. By the 1850s, Michigan began leading the nation in lumber production, a dominance it maintained until the 1880s, all driven by those huge white pine forests.
And we can't skip the political milestone that cemented its northern identity, the first statewide meeting of the Republican Party.
Took place in Jackson, Michigan on July 6, 1854.
And that fact highlights the historical trajectory. Michigan was profoundly influenced by New England political thought.
Right, which kept it predominantly Republican and staunchly Unionist until the Great Depression and the rise of industrial unionism in the 1930s.
So this history of anti-slavery sentiment in industrial resource extraction forms the bridge to the next major chapter, the age of the automobile.
Now we enter the 20th century. And Michigan's identity pivots sharply from raw materials, the lumber and ore of the UP, to global finished goods.
And the connection is direct. The iron ore mined in the UP was now being forged into the chassis of the cars assembled in Detroit.
That's the crucial link. Raw materials meeting engineering genius. Michigan was essentially ground zero for the auto industry due to an unprecedented concentration of engineering and entrepreneurial expertise in one small geographical area.
The sources highlight names like Ransom E. Olds, the Dodge brothers, Henry Leland, David Dunbar Buick, and of course, Henry Ford.
Ford's innovations were they were revolutionary. His development of the moving assembly line in the Highland Park plant didn't just speed up production.
No, it codified modern mass production. It fundamentally changed global transportation, leisure, private life. It made the automobile accessible to the middle class.
And that innovation fueled astonishing urban growth, driven by the need for labor. Automobile production turned Detroit into the biggest industrial job magnet in the country.
Which then triggered the Great Migration.
Exactly. Both black and white Appalachian migrants pouring in from the rural South alongside massive waves of international immigrants.
The sources mention Finns, Macedonians, and the Dutch among those European waves. The demographics shifted violently and rapidly.
Absolutely. The need for labor was insatiable. Ford famously introduced the $5 day in 1914, which, while it was intended in part to reduce turnover.
It also attracted a massive, diverse labor pool.
A huge one. By 1920, Detroit was the fourth largest city in the United States. And by the 1930s, the sources note that public schools were dealing with students who spoke over 30 different languages.
Wow. A true, fast-paced industrial melting pot, mixing cultures at an unprecedented speed.
And that incredible manufacturing infrastructure proved critical not just for cars, but for global conflict.
It did. The entire state, particularly the Metro Detroit area, converted its capacity to defense during World War II.
Earning the enduring nickname, the Arsenal of Democracy, Michigan produced 10.9% of all U.S. military armaments during the war.
Let's put that number in context. What were they producing?
Tanks, bombers, and engines on a massive scale. Willow Run Assembly Plant, built by Ford, was famously producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes at its peak.
Every 63 minutes.
Chrysler operated the Detroit Arsenal tank plant, creating thousands of tanks. This shift required a huge mobilization of the labor force, including a massive increase in female employment in factory roles.
And the state ranked second nationally in military production,
Yeah.
only behind the immense financial power of New York.
That's right. So we fast forward to the modern era, and while the auto industry has faced serious challenges, recessions, globalization, the pivot to electric vehicles.
Michigan remains the undeniable nerve center of the U.S. automotive industry.
Yes. It's home to the big three headquarters, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, all clustered in Metro Detroit. And the economic impact is far broader than just the assembly plants.
Right. The sources state that the domestic auto industry, directly and indirectly, accounts for 1 in every 10 jobs in the entire U.S.
1 in 10. That is a national economic anchor centered right there.
But the story isn't just about legacy manufacturing. It's about a pivot toward high-tech and R&D.
And this is where it gets really interesting and often overlooked. Michigan ranked 4th in high-tech employment with 568,000 high-tech workers as of 2002. More impressively, it typically ranks 3rd or 4th in overall research and development expenditures.
And here's the key takeaway on that R&D, and this is what really struck me. The sources highlight that R&D actually comprises a higher percentage of the state's overall gross domestic product than for any other U.S. state. Why is that? What drives that commitment?
It's the legacy engineering culture, combined with major university research institutions like the University of Michigan and Michigan State. The entire region is built on solving complex mechanical and materials problems.
So today,
that means massive investment in battery technology, autonomous driving, and defense contracts. It suggests that Michigan isn't just assembling cars, it's defining the future of transportation and robotics.
and the post-recession recovery figures are quite telling of this resilience. The sources note that in 2010, Michigan led the nation in job creation improvement, according to the Gallup Index.
And from 2007 to 2009, it ranked 3rd nationally for new corporate facilities and expansions. These figures show that when the legacy industries contracted, the core engineering and manufacturing base successfully diversified.
Leveraging the existing talent pool.
Exactly, into logistics, IT, and related high-tech sectors.
Beyond the automotive giants, Michigan has built a strong corporate presence in unexpected sectors. For instance, 2 of the top 4 pizza chains in the country.
Domino's Pizza and Little Caesars, both founded and headquartered right there.
It speaks to the local spirit of entrepreneurship. Plus, you have those iconic, regionally famous food and beverage products.
Verner's Ginger Ale, which dates back to 1866 and is one of the oldest soft drinks in America, and Faygo, founded in 1907. These are brands deeply ingrained in the local culture.
And we have to talk about the other major urban center, Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids has maintained its specialized industrial identity since 1838 as a national center for furniture.
Home to 5 of the world's leading office furniture companies, most notably Steelcase.
And this West Michigan region is also the corporate home to retail giants like Amway and the supermarket chain Meijer.
Before we transition, we need to note a critical policy change in the labor landscape. The repeal of the right-to-work law in 2023.
That is a massive shift, especially given Michigan's history as the birthplace of the United Auto Workers, the UAW.
What does that signal?
It signals a potent return to strength for organized labor in the state and will undoubtedly impact future collective bargaining agreements, potentially raising costs, but also strengthening union density across various sectors.
Okay, speaking of other economic drivers, let's pivot back to the water and the land that sustains 2 other massive pillars: agriculture and tourism.
The sources confirm Michigan is second only to California in agricultural diversity, sustaining a huge farming sector with 54,800 farms.
And they lead the country in national production of a surprisingly specific list of items.
It's a very eclectic list.
Tart cherries, 70% of the country's supply, mainly the Montmorency variety. Blueberries, pickled cucumbers, navy beans, and even petunias.
That success in fruit farming, particularly along the western side of the Lower Peninsula, West Michigan and Northwest Michigan, centered around Traverse City, is a direct climatic gift from Lake Michigan.
It's the lake effect.
Exactly. The sources explain how the massive body of water moderates the climate, delaying bloom in the spring to prevent frost damage, and extending the growing season into the fall.
It's environmental engineering by nature itself. And you have major industry built around these crops.
Like the Michigan Sugar Company, which is the largest sugar refiner east of the Mississippi River.
Then there's tourism, which is essential, supporting 193,000 jobs.
And with over 50% forest land, thousands of miles of beaches, and 78 state parks, Michigan boasts the largest state park and state forest system in the nation.
This truly cements the water-winter wonderland identity. The appeal is incredibly diverse. You have the spectacular natural attractions like Sleeping Bear Dunes.
Massive, stunning sand dunes overlooking Lake Michigan, Tacoma Falls, and the remote Isle Royale National Park.
And then there are unique destinations, like Mackinac Island, a throwback to the Victorian era.
Famous for the Grand Hotel and its absolute ban on cars. Visitors travel by ferry and horse-drawn carriage. It's an intentional step back in time.
And in terms of recreation, Michigan is a national leader. It has the highest number of golf courses and the highest number of registered snowmobiles.
It is truly a four-season recreational destination.
And this leads us to one of the most remarkable cultural facts, the source's detail.
I think I know what you're getting at.
With over 1 million licensed hunters contributing $2 billion annually, the hunting culture is a critical economic and social pillar.
Yes, and the detail that really stuck with me is that many rural schools cancel classes on the opening day of firearm deer season due to attendance concerns.
That's a powerful indication of the deep, historic significance of the outdoor industry to local communities. It's not just a hobby, it's an annual right.
And that reliance on the land and water informs not just the economy, but the deep cultural identity of the people who call Michigan home.
Okay, let's turn now to the demographics that make up this unique landscape.
The population growth has been stable and positive since 1800, increasing by over 2% between 2010 and 2020. Historically, it is dominated by European descent, reflecting those early immigrant waves: German, British, Irish, and Polish ancestry.
You see very distinct cultural pockets. Western Michigan is famous for its Dutch heritage.
Very distinct, especially visible in places like Holland and Grand Rapids, where you even have the annual Tulip Time Festival.
And as we discussed, the UP retains a strong presence of Scandinavian and Finnish Americans, drawn by the mining and lumber industries.
Then the Black and African American community was fundamentally shaped by the Great Migration, historically forming a majority in cities like Detroit and Flint.
However, the sources note that as of 2021 estimates, Detroit was no longer the largest Black majority city in the U.S.
What's truly fascinating is the wave of non-European immigration that settled heavily in southeast Michigan. As of 2007, about 300,000 people in the area trace their descent from the Middle East and Asia.
This population is heavily concentrated in Dearborn.
Yes. Dearborn is home to a sizable and diverse Arab American community, including Assyrians, Lebanese, Yemenis, and Iraqis.
And the sources indicate that many of the earliest groups, particularly the Chaldeans and Lebanese, were drawn by the promises of industrial jobs in the auto plants as far back as the 1920s.
A very long history. And Dearborn is also home to a major landmark, the Islamic Center of America, which is cited as the largest mosque in North America.
Looking further east, the Japanese population is heavily concentrated in the metro Detroit and Ann Arbor areas.
With 80% living across 4 specific counties, Novi specifically has the largest Japanese national population in the state, driven largely by the massive auto industry and its supply chain,
which requires constant international coordination. And the sources even mention smaller, yet deeply rooted communities. We have the Hmong community.
Originally concentrated in Detroit, now shifting toward Pontiac and Warren, with Lansing hosting a statewide Hmong New Year festival.
This creates an astonishing linguistic tapestry. While English is spoken by 90.1% of residents, Spanish is second at 2.9%, followed by Arabic at 1.05%.
But the nuanced detail I find most striking is the presence of Syriac languages. Languages like Modern Aramaic and Northeastern Neo-Aramaic spoken by 0.25% of the population over age 5.
That's a very specific linguistic footprint. What's the connection there?
It's tied directly to the history of Christian, Assyrian, and Chaldean immigration from the Middle East, particularly Iraq and Syria, who settled near their family networks in the Detroit area.
So they maintain these ancient languages in their new homeland,
creating a truly unique pocket of linguistic survival right in the American Midwest.
Let's move on to culture, focusing on the sounds that have emanated from Michigan. The state's contributions to American music are globally significant.
Known for 3 major trends: Motown and soul, techno music, and early punk rock.
Motown is the titan, of course. It's defined by artists like the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and the legendary Aretha Franklin.
Motown Records, founded in Detroit, didn't just produce music. It was a cultural force that defined the sound of 1960s America.
Characterized by sophisticated pop structures and gospel-infused vocals.
Then you have the later trends. The sound of Detroit's industrial decline and grit fueled both punk and techno.
Right, you have the raw power of early punk, embodied by artists like Iggy Pop and the Stooges.
And then completely different, you have techno music. Detroit is recognized globally as the birthplace of techno, born in the early 1980s by Black artists who fused European synthesizers with funk and industrial rhythms.
A sound that literally pulses with the energy of the factory floor.
And contemporary artists maintain this legacy. Bob Seger, Madonna, Kid Rock, Eminem, The White Stripes. It's an incredibly fertile, diverse musical ground.
Beyond music, the performing arts scene is anchored in Detroit's spectacular historic venues.
The Fox Theater, the Detroit Opera House, and Orchestra Hall. And here's a specific fact that ties Detroit to global theater: the Nederlander organization.
The largest controller of Broadway productions in New York City.
Actually originated in Detroit.
Finally, sports. Michigan is truly a sports powerhouse. All 4 major league teams are headquartered in Metro Detroit.
The Tigers for baseball, Lions for football, Red Wings for ice hockey, and the Pistons for basketball.
We have to give a special nod to hockey history here. While Detroit is nicknamed Hockey Town.
Professional hockey actually got its start far north in the UP in Houghton, Michigan, with the Portage Lakers back in 1903.
And of course, collegiate sports dominate the cultural landscape, particularly the intense rivalry between the Big Ten teams.
The Michigan Wolverines in Ann Arbor and the Michigan State Spartans in Lansing. That rivalry is a massive annual economic and cultural event that just splits the state.
Okay, let's talk about how the state physically functions and connects to the world through infrastructure and governance.
When you consider Michigan's location, its international connection is paramount.
That's right. The Detroit-Windsor corridor connecting Michigan to Ontario is crucial. The sources reveal that the Detroit-Windsor border crossing is the single busiest international border crossing in North America by trade volume.
I mean, think about that scale. Approximately 1/3 of all trade between Canada and the U.S. passes through this critical corridor.
That makes Michigan not just a regional hub, but a global gateway.
And that's why the multiple international crossings, the Ambassador Bridge, the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, and the Blue Water Bridge are so vital.
And we also have to mention the massive investment in future infrastructure, the Gordie Howe International Bridge.
It's under construction, expected to be completed in early 2026. This parallel structure is vital for ensuring trade redundancy.
For a state bifurcated by water, internal roadways are equally vital. I-75 is the main north-south artery.
It connects Detroit, crosses the Mackinac Bridge, and heads all the way north to Sault Ste. Marie. I-94, on the other hand, is the crucial east-west artery.
The primary connection between Detroit and major Midwest cities like Chicago.
And the UP is serviced by US 2, which runs along Lake Michigan's northern shore, keeping those far-flung communities connected.
And air travel is anchored by Detroit Metropolitan Airport, DTW.
It's a major Delta Airlines hub, ranked as the 16th busiest airfield in North America by passenger traffic as of 2010.
Moving to energy, Michigan's production mix reflects its industrial history, but also its aggressive focus on future renewables.
In 2020, the state produced a massive 116,700 gigawatt of electrical energy.
And coal power is the current leading source, producing roughly half the supply.
But, and this is important, the sources point out that all of that coal has to be imported via train and lake freighters, as there are no active coal mines in Michigan.
Nuclear power is also significant, supplying about 26% of the state's electricity from 3 active plants,
including the Donald C. Cook nuclear plant, the largest. But the key story here is the commitment to phase out coal, driven by environmental and economic factors.
That's a huge commitment. Consumers Energy plans to close all remaining coal plants by 2025.
And DTE plans to retire 2,100 millijoule of coal power by 2023. This aggressive timeline creates significant job transition challenges.
But the pivot is being subsidized by major investment in renewable infrastructure, particularly wind.
Yes. Michigan successfully met state mandates of 12.5% renewable energy by 2019 and 15% by 2021. And wind energy accounted for nearly 2/3, 59% of those energy credits in 2021.
So the state is actively moving from a 20th century fuel source to 21st century clean power.
It is. Finally, let's look at governance and politics. The structure is decentralized, divided among state, 83 counties, and townships.
A key distinction in local governance is between general law and charter townships.
And the charter status was created to provide greater protection against annexation by neighboring cities.
That's an important nuance. Why would a township need that level of protection?
Because charter status allows these communities to maintain greater local autonomy, particularly over their tax base and zoning decisions, it prevents larger neighboring cities like Detroit or Grand Rapids from unilaterally annexing them when they expand.
So it's a mechanism for preserving suburban and semi-rural identity and tax revenue.
Exactly. The judicial branch is topped by the Michigan Supreme Court, whose 7 members are elected to staggered 8-year terms.
And constitutionally, Michigan has had 4 constitutions, but a major item is coming up.
Yes, voters are scheduled to consider a general revision of the Constitution in November 2026. This question is mandated to be put to voters every 16 years.
Politically, Michigan has evolved into a crucial swing state since the 1990s.
And the sources highlight a fascinating, almost built-in counterbalance trend. From 1994 to 2022, the governor-elect always came from the party opposite the sitting U.S. presidency.
They love balance.
Yes, they often swing against the national tide. And the current political landscape is split. Following the 2024 elections, Democrats hold a narrow majority in the Senate, while Republicans hold a majority in the House.
What does that split legislature mean in practical terms for governing?
It means policy gridlock is likely unless there is bipartisan compromise. Key initiatives, especially regarding spending, taxes, or major social policy, require cooperation.
So this political reality often forces compromises and limits the ability of the executive branch to implement a single-party agenda swiftly.
That's a good way to put it. And we should remember that Michigan is the home state of Gerald Ford, the 38th president, whose presidential library resides at the University of Michigan.
Then finally, Michigan has been proactive in defining voting rights and freedoms. A 2020 study ranked it the 13th easiest state for citizens to vote in.
And recent constitutional amendments allow voting by mail and protect key rights, including abortion and contraceptive rights. The Cato Institute even ranked Michigan 7th overall for personal and economic freedom in 2023.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's revisit some of the unique symbolism that defines this massive dualistic state. We've discussed the Great Lakes state and the Mitten state, but the traditional nickname is the Wolverine state.
And that nickname is a genuine historical mystery. It's one of my favorite contradictory facts about the state.
The origins are obscure.
Completely. It may stem from the busy fur trade in Sault Ste. Marie in the 18th century where Wolverine furs were traded, or perhaps from an early disparagement comparing the early settlers to the fiercely vicious Wolverine mammal.
What makes that story so incredible is the contrasting fact. Wolverines are virtually non-existent in Michigan.
Extremely rare. The first confirmed sighting in 200 years didn't happen until 2004.
So you have a state nicknamed after a fearsome animal that essentially doesn't live there. It's pure mythological identity.
It speaks volumes about the historical grit and perceived ruggedness they wanted to project.
And beyond the Wolverine, the state symbols point back to the geography we started with.
They do. The state stone is the Petoskey stone, which is fossilized coral from an ancient sea that once covered the middle of the continent. The state gem is the Isle Royale greenstone.
Even the state wildflower, the dwarf lake iris, is a federally listed threatened species.
Highlighting the fragility of the pristine ecosystems they seek to protect.
So what does this all mean? Our sources paint a compelling picture of a state defined by 2 powerful competing forces.
Its immense industrial and high-tech power, the legacy of the automotive industry and heavy R&D expenditure, constantly balanced against its profound connection to nature, water, and vast forest systems.
It's a state born of compromise, the concession of the Upper Peninsula to resolve the Toledo War.
And that history of negotiation and integration has created a truly unique, diverse, and economically influential hub, sitting right at the center of the Great Lakes megalopolis.
It manages to be both heavily urban, driving global innovation, and intensely wild, offering some of the purest natural landscapes in the Midwest.
Which leads us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over.
We discussed Detroit Metropolitan Airport being one of the busiest airfields in North America, servicing massive amounts of traffic every single day, connecting the state globally.
Yes. Yet Michigan is also recognized as one of the world's best scuba diving destinations.
Think about that contradiction. Why is the diving so good?
Because the Great Lakes, being fresh and cold, preserve history. Michigan maintains 13 protected underwater preserves, which contain countless historical shipwrecks, from early French trading vessels to massive 19th century ore carriers.
So this contrast highlights that the state's most significant history doesn't just rest on its land or flow through its factories.
But lies submerged, preserved, and protected beneath the surface of the large water that defines it. Think about that hidden history beneath the waves the next time you look at that mitten shape.